We have Andrew talking about how to fix a bug, the automation Panda going manual.
All right, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Let me introduce you in a couple of lines, Andrew. Then I'll give it back to you. Andrew is also known as Pandy. He's the person behind Automation Panda. He is a quality professional champion who loves to help people build better quality softwares. Currently, he works as a senior director of product management at Cycle Labs. He's basically focusing on building an excellent test automation platform for enterprise systems. We're very glad to have you with us, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
And over to you.
All righty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you
Good
for
morning.
staying late for my session. First of all, I do want to apologize tremendously that I was unable to join at the originally scheduled time yesterday. All I can say is I've had a very, very rough week. But we're here, it's now, and we are going to have a rather fun closing keynote. So buckle up, buttercups. Let's roll. Um, as was said, my name is Andy Knight. I'm the Automation Panda. I live in the United States in North Carolina. I am historically I've been an SDET building solutions to testing problems. I've had a very interesting career journey for the past couple years. I now find myself in product management for a testing company. So I'm building, just not doing as much of the coding, more of the design, architecture, directional kind of stuff. So thank you again, Agile Testing Alliance, for inviting me to speak. This is quite an honor. Into the talk. So today I want to tell you a story about a bug. Now, given that this is the global testing retreat, I'm sure we all have many, many stories about bugs from our career, and I could tell you tons of my own. But today I'm going to tell you a story about a very special bug. I want to tell you about my bug, my 1970 Volkswagen Beetle. Ah, isn't she beautiful? This is my car. This is my daily driver. I drive it all around town, and it is a ton of fun to drive. But if I can be honest, this car has given me more hassle than any other bug in my career. And this thing doesn't even have a computer. So I'm going to tell you the whole story from when I bought it through all the issues I've had and all the things I've had to do to fix it. And together we will learn a thing or two about testing, troubleshooting, and quality. That's right, this is going to be a fun talk. So as I said, buckle up. So how did my adventure with the world's most appropriate car for a software tester start? It's rather ironic for a person like me in software testing to have a car named a bug. Well, the story actually starts with my wife. One day she came to me and asked me, "Hey, can we get an old Volkswagen bus for photography?" Now, my wife is a photographer, and these old Volkswagen buses are very popular for photo shoots, especially for weddings. Now, when she first asked me this, it was a bit daunting because my first thought was, well, we've never been into classic cars before. I've never worked on any cars, to be honest, and classic cars are just the next level of difficulty. And if you look at the prices of the old Volkswagen buses, restored ones can cost tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they're so popular. And I'm talking US American greenbacks. Oof, very, very expensive. So, being the good husband, rather than telling my wife no, I chose to redirect. I said, "Hey, honey, those buses are really cool, but I don't know if this is for us. I don't know if we can afford this. We've never worked on classic cars before. Is there another kind of car that you can do photography with that would be as iconic as a Volkswagen bus?" And she thought about it and she said, "Hey, what about a Beetle?" When she said that, I really couldn't say no. It awoke my younger self inside because when I was little Andy, my favorite car growing up was the Volkswagen Beetle. I had the die-cast metal toy cars where you pull them back and they zip forward. Watched all the Herbie movies. And so when my wife said, "Can we get a Beetle?" I couldn't say no. We did a little bit of research and we discovered that Beetles are much more plentiful than buses. And they are also much more affordable. The cost to maintain and upkeep them is much lower than a bus because they're smaller. And so I said, "Okay, honey, let's give this a try." My wife actually found a Beetle pretty quickly. It's on sale on Facebook, about an hour away from where we live in North Carolina. The owner's name was Joseph Smith, and he was a good old Southern boy. So we drove out to meet Mr. Smith to see his Beetle. And sure enough, it looked pretty darn good. There was just one problem. This. Anybody know what this is? Anybody? Drop it in the chat. That's right. This is a shifter, a stick shift. This car had a 4 on the floor manual transmission. I didn't know how to drive stick, but I told myself, that's okay. I'm an engineer. I'll figure it out. Mr. Joseph Smith was kind enough to give me a lesson with the stick shift in his backyard. He had a little gravel driveway there. And so as we're going around the loop, I'm herking and jerking. All the time he's shouting at me, "Mash the clutch!" Yeah, I didn't learn too well that day, but eventually I got the shift of it, or got the hang of it. So, what's the lesson here? Don't be afraid to try new things. I didn't know how to drive a car with a manual transmission. I didn't even know what it meant to own a classic car. But I was willing to learn and I was willing to give it a try. I chose not to let any sort of fear or doubt hold me back. And ultimately, I was the better for it. I'm glad that we got this car. Think about all the tough projects that you've been on. Have to test a new app that you don't know about? It's all right. You're an engineer. You'll figure it out. So, the name of this particular car, as many of you know, is the Volkswagen Beetle. Volkswagen is a German car maker. In fact, the name Volkswagen means people's car. The model that we affectionately call the Beetle was officially named the Type 1 because it was the first type of car that Volkswagen manufactured. Now, what makes the Beetle's design novel is the rear-mounted air-cooled engine. Most modern motors are water-cooled, meaning they need liquid coolant to help keep temperatures regulated. However, the old Volkswagen Beetle engine had a large fan that circulates air around the engine and specifically around the oil to cool it off. This means that the motor can be smaller with fewer parts, and therefore they have fewer points of failure. It's often joked that the old Volkswagen engines are just oversized lawnmower engines, because most lawnmowers are carbureted and air-cooled as well. Nevertheless, it's an engine that has worked for several decades, and hey, my car still runs, right? What's the lesson here? Learn your product domain, because knowledge is power. The more you learn about the thing you're working on, whether it's a web service, a web application, or an old Volkswagen Beetle, the better equipped you will be to handle any kinds of problems. Furthermore, domain expertise is AI proof. AI can't take away your human expertise from you. As AI technologies are taking over, remember, it's the humans who are truly the smart ones. All right, so I got my Beetle. I was really excited to start driving my new car, but within the first week, I already hit my first problem. I drove over to my mother-in-law's house. I parked the car. I got out, and immediately I smelled gasoline. Bum bum. Now, it doesn't take an expert to figure out that's really bad. So, after a small moment of panic, I took a deep breath. I looked around my car, and I tried to see if I could find any spots where it was leaking. Sure enough, I found a drip happening right underneath the front end, coming out from the gas tank. It was leaking from the point where the fuel neck connects to the gas tank. Now remember, the Beetle, the engine is in the rear, so the gas tank is in the front. After a little investigation, I discovered that the seals around the fuel neck were very old and no longer liquid tight. As I would drive the car around, some of the fuel would shake up and out of the tank through those leaky old seals. Leaking gas is frightening because it is a fire hazard, but I didn't let it scare me. I told myself again, that's okay. I'm an engineer. I'll figure it out. I took stock of the parts I needed to replace. I placed an order for the new parts online. When the parts arrived a week later, I pulled out my very limited set of tools and replaced the fuel neck with all the seals. Problem solved. My repair work made me feel great because I was able to do it myself. The parts were not expensive either, maybe only about 40 bucks. So try small fixes yourself. If something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. With a little bit of investigation and a little bit of common sense, you can probably figure out most issues that come your way. And when you do, it's so rewarding to fix them yourself. Even as a tester, if you can get in there and try to fix a bug, do it. You'll gain immense rapport. It felt great to fix that gas leak myself. Had the car back on the road in no time. Unfortunately, though, about a week later, more tragedy struck. I was driving down the road at about 60 miles an hour on the highway because this car was designed to drive the Autobahn. And all of a sudden, I noticed that I was losing speed. I pushed more on the accelerator, trying to get it back up. I pushed even more. The next thing I knew, I had the pedal on the floor, but my speed was dropping below 50 miles an hour. I looked out the rearview mirror and I saw thick black smoke billowing out of the engine. This was bad. So immediately I pulled off to the nearest exit into a gas station. I stopped the car, got out, opened up the engine hatch, and I just saw disaster. Smoke kept billowing out. Liquids were gushing out onto the pavement. It was super hot to the point where it was seething, like, and the engine was not starting up again. I had effectively overheated my air-cooled engine and blown it up. It was a sad, sad day. Called up a tow truck to take it to my mechanic, went home, and just felt miserable. There's no other way to put it. It was the worst case scenario of what could go wrong with this car. I had blown up the engine. And there's some tough lessons here too. Explosions will happen. Bad ones. You can hit the worst case scenario. Like Murphy says, anything that can go wrong will. But we should realize that sometimes it's our job to be the blast shield. Sometimes we're the ones who are meant to catch those problems before others do. If you're a tester, it's your job to catch the explosions before your customers and your end users do. Remember that. So I called up my mechanic, told him the situation. He said, listen, man, if that engine blew up on the highway, it was most likely running too hot, which means the engine block itself probably warped. You can try to do a rebuild of that engine, but there's a good chance that a rebuild won't truly fix it. You probably just need to get a whole new engine. And when he said that, my heart sank because I was not expecting to replace the whole engine. Took a step back, took a deep breath, and thought to myself, if I need a whole new engine, then how hard would it be to just swap out the old one for a new one? I don't know how to do that yet, but that's okay. I'm an engineer. I'll figure it out. So I decided to get my hands dirty. I got the manuals. I read up all about the Type 1 engine. I watched all kinds of YouTube videos. I searched all kinds of forums. Ultimately, I learned that to swap one of these Volkswagen Beetle engines is actually not as hard as you might think. My first question was, can you actually get a new Volkswagen Beetle engine today in, I guess at that time was 2021? And the answer, surprisingly, is and was yes. There are plenty of shops around the country that will build an entirely new Volkswagen Type 1 engine, like stock, and ship it to your garage. You just need to give them a couple months to build it. Second question, how do I disconnect the engine from the body? Thankfully, there aren't too many connecting points. First of all, you need to disconnect the fuel line. Then there's a number of electrical wires to disconnect. Then finally, there are 4 bolts that mount the engine itself to the chassis. Once you disconnect all that, you grab the engine by the tailpipes, give it a shimmy shake, pull it towards you, and it comes right off. Third question was, how do you actually get the engine out of the engine bay? Thankfully, you don't need a crane or a hoist. After disconnecting the engine, you jack the entire backside of the Beetle up, and then the engine drops down. The engine itself only weighs about 220 pounds. Fourth question was, do I need any new parts other than the engine itself? And sure enough, I did need a few things. I need some hoses, bolts, gaskets, new heater boxes, and a new muffler. My fifth and final question was, do I need any new tools? And sure enough, I did. I needed a jack stands, an engine dolly, and a set of wrenches. After all that, everything came down to one final question. Could I actually do this? Could I actually take out an old engine, put in a new one, and have it run? Yes. With a little help from my friends, I was able to do it all in my garage at home. It was awesome. And so here's a picture of the old engine being dropped out. And here's the new engine ready to be installed. Nice and shiny. The lesson here is if you set your mind to it, you can do it. Break down big problems, come up with a plan, use everything you know, use all the resources you have, try some things, and you can do things that you thought you'd never ever be able to do. I never imagined I could take on a car project this big, but I did, and it turned out okay. With the new engine swapped into place, I felt like I had a whole new car. Well, at least on the outside. The inside of the car was still kind of icky. The previous owner, good old Southern boy Joseph Smith, was a chain smoker. And he smoked inside the Beetle at all times. So I wanted to make the inside of the car nice. So I did. Started by replacing the steering wheel with this nice new polished one. Next, I removed the old water-damaged floor panels and installed soundproof sheets. And then I put the new ones on. The new panels were a stunning improvement. Then I gutted the whole interior down to the bare metal. The seats, the carpets, and the old pads all came out. I installed a new headliner along the ceiling. It's a nice sand-colored tweed material to match the exterior's paint. And so here's the interior with the new headliner, new brown carpet, and new sun visors. The seats needed new upholstery and cushions as well. And it's so much nicer now. Here's the back seat. I also installed a full sound system. You can see the 6x9 woofers on the back bench, and underneath that shelf is an 8-inch subwoofer. So when I drive around town, the Beetle goes boom, boom. Now the Beetle feels like a whole new car. I think the lesson here is that user experience really does matter. You can have a brand new engine that runs and performs well, but ultimately it won't matter if the cabin reminds you of an ashtray. User experience really does matter. It is an indispensable part of a product's overall quality. So if we are not testing for user experience as much as other functionalities, we're not fully doing our job. So with a whole new engine and a whole new interior, I was cruising in style, or so I thought. Things were going okay for a while, but over time, problems started happening. Driving down the road, I would sometimes hear a pop, pop, pop kind of sound. And the car would shake back and forth. At first, it was rare, and I didn't think too much of it. But then it started happening more frequently and more violently. I thought to myself, uh-oh, that's not right. But that's okay. I'm an engineer. I'll figure it out. Turned out the issue was a backfire, which happens when there is too much of a lean mixture of fuel and air going into the engine. A lean mixture has too much air, whereas a rich mixture has too much fuel. Lean mixtures usually happen when there's some sort of air leak in the engine. It causes the engine to ignite at the wrong time, and it manifests as flames shooting out of the tailpipes or up through the carburetor. Now, I tried everything to fix this backfire. I adjusted the timing by twisting the distributor back and forth to get it between 5 to 10 degrees before top dead center, which is on spec. I adjusted all the valves to have a 0.006 inch gap. I searched for air leaks up and down the intake manifold, but could not find any. I replaced the electric fuel pump because it was putting too much pressure on the gas lines. I swapped the distributor and the coil to a single vacuum advanced distributor, which is supposed to overcome the flat spot when accelerating. I tuned the carburetor to set the right fuel-air mixture. However, I discovered that twisting the different screws made no difference at all, and the carburetor itself turned out to be a piece of junk. So I replaced the carburetor too. I even discovered a loose rocker arm on the passenger side, so I replaced that. None of these attempts actually fixed that backfire. By this point, I was pulling my hair out because I tried just about everything. In the end, I gave up and took it to a local mechanic. I said to myself, I'll pay for professional help. But they didn't make it better. In fact, they only made things worse. All they did was stick a bigger jet in the carburetor to shoot more fuel in to try to balance the mixture, but they didn't actually find the root cause of the problem. Finally, one day while driving down the road, the backfire started popping worse than ever. The next thing I know, I heard the largest kaboom that I had ever heard, and the engine just died. It was done. It would not turn on again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the second time that I blew up my engine. The lesson here is to be relentless in your root cause analysis. If there's an issue, don't let it go. Don't give up on it. Don't ignore bugs just because they are difficult to resolve. Try everything, because otherwise things can blow up pretty badly. So yes, I blew up my engine a second time. I was stuck. I tried everything in the manuals, in the forums, in the YouTube videos, and even taking it to a quote-unquote professional. Nothing worked. And now the engine wasn't running at all. Every time I hit problems before, I would tell myself, that's okay, I'm an engineer, I'll figure it out. But this time, it wasn't okay. I wasn't okay. I felt really depressed about it. I didn't even touch my car for a few months because I had pretty much given up. But thankfully, not all hope was lost because I had a friend come help me out. And that friend was Uncle Jackson. Uncle Jackson's a bit of an older fellow. He's been a mechanic for several years. He has forgotten more about cars than I have yet learned. When I told him about the problems with the Beetle, his first response wasn't to douse me with technical information. It was emotional support. He told me, that's okay, we'll figure it out together. Uncle Jackson was there for me when I needed a friend most. He gave me the energy and the motivation to give it one more try. Sometimes problems hit us very hard, and there's a point where we just need a little bit of encouragement. We need that friend. We need someone like Uncle Jackson to come alongside us and propel us forward. The lesson here is when you're in that pit of despair, don't give up. Find your people. Find your community. Find those who are going to be there for you, to support you, to help you get back up. And be ready to be that person for others around you when they need it. At this event today, we are all in the software testing community. We have each other when things get tough at work or we can't figure out our own bugs. Don't forget that. We are a community. So, where did Uncle Jackson and I start? The only place we had yet to check on the engine was the exhaust system. We popped open the hood, disconnected the muffler, grabbed it by the tailpipes, gave it that shimmy shake, and pulled it off. Lo and behold, we found exactly where an exhaust leak was happening. It was happening at the point where the muffler met the engine head. In this picture here, you can see the black soot covering one side of the gasket and the port on the engine head. That was clear, undeniable evidence that there was an exhaust leak happening right there. And that, my friends, was the source of the backfire. That's why I couldn't find it on all the other parts above that in the engine. The next thing to do was dig deeper, because we had to see why the engine had lost compression and was no longer firing. We dropped the engine out, tore the engine down to its heads and cylinders. And sure enough, we discovered that 3 of the 4 valves had burnt, and all 4 cylinders had pretty bad scraping on the sides. You can see the scorching on cylinder number 2 right here. So, we sent the heads to a machine shop to lap the valves nice and tight. We removed the cylinders and bought a whole new set of pistons, which was far less expensive than you might think. We oiled them up, locked the piston rings, put the new cylinders with the pistons back on the crankcase, put the heads on that were all nice and machined, and basically rebuilt the whole engine. Before putting the engine back into the Beetle, I even did a smoke test to make absolutely sure there were no more exhaust leaks. That's right, me, any night, Automation Panda, doing smoke tests in real life. This was the deepest I had ever gone into any engine, let alone this one. Coming out of this project, I felt like a champion. I felt invincible. I had learned the Type 1 engine better than I had ever learned it before, and I felt almost unstoppable with any other problems that this engine could throw at me. This project reminded me of momentous occasions in my software career. It reminded me of the first time that I opened up calculator programs on my TI 83 Plus graphing calculator in high school to teach myself how to program. It felt like the first time I ripped open a test automation framework to see exactly how its tests started, stopped, and reported failures. It felt like the first time I ripped open a web application to see how HTTP requests and responses worked. When you get that hands-on experience and you actually learn a new thing deeply, it is so empowering, so awesome, and so special. You feel like you can solve any problems after that. There is no substitute for rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. Sometimes you just have to get in there and try new things. You just need to pop open the hood and get in there, because nothing compares to the experience you gain from doing your own troubleshooting. After all that work, the Beetle was finally back on the road. Since then, it's been driving very well. When I drive it around town, everybody stops and stares. They love it. I mean, come on, even kids these days recognize the Volkswagen Beetle. It is the most iconic car in history. There's something to be said for Fahrvergnügen, the pleasure of driving. When I drive the Beetle around town, it's unlike any other car I've driven. It feels like an oversized go-kart. It's just fun to drive. And it's so cool to see how much joy it brings other people when they see it. So many times people will come up to me and tell me about their experiences with the Volkswagen Beetle. Back in the day, either everyone owned one or they knew someone who owned one. There were 21.5 million of these produced, more than any other car platform in history. And the memories that people have associated with this particular kind of car and its distinctive shape are unmatched by any other. It's so cool to see my Beetle bring so much joy to so many people. Fahrvergnügen teaches us that we should do the highest quality work we can. When we bring excellence and quality into our work, everyone appreciates it. There is pleasure and satisfaction and goodness and joy that comes from a job well done. So now I fixed my Beetle. Yay! What's next? Well, do you remember how this story started? Do you remember how my wife wanted to get a Volkswagen bus for photography? That's right. Oh, yes, that's right. We got a bus. This is a 1979 Volkswagen Type 2 transporter. It's the bay window style with the elongated windows and the single windshield. 1979 was the last year that they made the bus of this style. We rescued this bus from a field in East Carolina where it had been left to rust for at least 20 years. All things considered, it didn't have any dents. The rust is minor, and it had all the parts, including the engine. I am going to use everything I've learned in fixing the bug to bring this bus back to its former glory and help my wife live her dreams. The work is never done. Thankfully, skills like testing and troubleshooting are highly transferable, whether you're working on a software bug or a 1970 Volkswagen bug. Continuously hone your skills and strive for excellence. You're an engineer. You'll figure it out. And when things get tough, just remember, it's a bug. It's not a bug, it's a feature. So thank you very much for attending my keynote address today. It's not the typical kind of keynote you'll see at a software conference, but I hope that my story resonated with you and can motivate you to overcome the challenges that you face. Again, my name is Andy Knight, the Automation Panda. Go fix those bugs.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. The fact that it was not like anything else, I think, brought a lot of attention, and it's the best thing that we could end our virtual conference with. It was typically like a movie, and I'm just trying to collate all the. There's a lot of applauds and a lot of comments for you on the chat. I think you also upheld that key skill of storytelling. Everybody were glued to your screen and your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Andy, this is Aditya here, and we are glad that you could do it. And it was amazing. I think if you look at the comments, we were all glued. And as what Dipti said, and if you look at the comments, this is the best keynote we could have ever had. So big thank you, Andrew, for doing this. And we are glad that you could do it for us. Many thanks. I don't have words to be saying that we're indebted, but we are truly grateful for your session today. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all for inviting me and being patient with me. It was truly an honor to be here and to share this story because let me tell you, it was a heck of a journey with lots of pain and lots of tears.
Yes. So are we going to hear for the bus next time?
Hopefully. So
Yes.
I was hoping to start the bus actually like the fall of this year. That's not going to happen. So it's going to be my 2025 New Year's resolution to get the bus back on the road.
Well, we will love to see how that journey goes through, and we would love to have you back telling that story to us if possible. Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much. Thank you so much.